today I'm 25 when we're shooting this in 2025. I started everything when I was 13 years old. So at 13, I ski raced as a young kid. And the reason that's relevant is because at a ski camp, I met this family, Dr. Pompa. He's still pretty relevant now. He's got the Dr. Pompa program. And he and his son, I spent a lot of time with them. He was a great skier, super into health. They had an incredible relationship and honestly just super value-based. I was like, wow, you sort of see what's possible. And both in relationship, they're also super intelligent. And so it was like sort of opened up my mind to, again, what's possible, what's out there. And I left that ski camp in Mount Hood, Oregon, came home, got a quarter-page flyer that said I'll do basically anything for $10 an hour. So passed that around to all of our neighbors, and within, I would say, a week, I had a few calls from the neighbors saying, "Hey, can you come do this? Can you come do this?" It started off with little things like weeding the garden, picking up rocks for a guy who didn't want to have him sucked up into a snowblower for his dog path. I dog sat for a neighbor. Did pretty much anything and everything. You texted me. It was a yes. We did it. If I didn't know how to do it, I would say yes, and then I'd go find someone who knew how to do it. So we started off pretty early. I was back in 2013, and then over the course of the following years, continued to basically just say yes to anything and everything, and that sort of quickly evolved into mostly outdoor stuff. Buckthorn here in Minnesota, it's an invasive species. It's also a real pain in the butt to get rid of. So you go cut it, you got to spray it or paint it, and then you got to deal with it. And it's got a bunch of thorns. So I would, for the first few years, that was like primarily what I did in our neighborhood. We all had 5-acre lots, and it was filled with buckthorn. So plenty of work to go around for this guy.
That was every summer for me at my grandpa's.
Oh, really?
My grandpa would be like, "Come on over, we got the buckthorn again." I'm like, I thought I painted it.
Yeah, and you're like, yeah, and there's 10 more showing up right there. So did a lot of that. Hired a buddy who I was doing track and field with in high school. So I started with 13. So what is that, 7th and 8th grade? By year 2, I'd hired a buddy. I was charging $10, paying $10, and quickly found out that I'd like to make a little more money. So I started charging $12, then $15, and still paying 10. So that was sort of like the first principle that I learned is like, oh, this is like how you start making money. As far as like support and stuff from the parents, I used their chainsaw, and they supported the gas and stuff like that. So I didn't go into the negative, with that venture. But above and beyond that, it was my first big check was $700. The first year I made $3,500 total. 13. Yeah. Oh my God, as a 13-year-old, it's like you can buy anything in the world. You're like, what do I do with this? And so that was fantastic. Learned a lot of lessons, and just worked my butt off. It was just sort of, I would call it, you just work until you're tired and you just keep going. And then
anything from those early days that still you think you've held on to is like a fundamental lesson? I
think I'll even plug First Form here, but First Form, it says we do the work, right? That's sort of their saying. And that I embrace that to the core, right? In order to be successful, you have to do the work, right? You have to pass out the flyer. You have to call the customer. You have to respond to them quickly. You have to show up and go cut the buckthorn for 10 hours a day. Like, you just have to do the action. There's no other secret sauce to being successful, and that can be in any way, shape, or form, right? Like whether that's, paying attention to your spouse and your family to have a successful marriage or to have a successful relationship or a successful business, you have to do the work. So I would say that's the core principle that I've held from the early days. The only reason I continued to grow and our business continued to grow is we did the work, and it was sort of just don't ask questions, say yes, keep going, make it happen. So I would say that's core principle from the early years.
What was the breakthrough for taking the business to the next level where it's like really actually sustainable, providing a living?
Yeah.
Did you go to college, or was it, did you decide to go full time in the business, or what was that?
Yeah, so it was a little bit mixed journey. So parents wanted me to go to college. My parents come from heavy, educational backgrounds. Dad's an MD, mom's master's degree, and her parents were both PhD professors in different subjects, and taught at a university. She worked at the university. So there's a lot of like that traditional institutional that I was up against because I'm taking a very different path. And so the answer is over the first few years, I think from 13 to probably 18, when we were 18, when I was graduating high school, we just cracked over $500,000 in revenue. So we were plenty sustainable by that point. I was also still living at home. And so um, at the time, you keep your costs low. My lifestyle was also just school, work, repeat. So there's no time to, spend money. So a lot of it just got stowed away. So it was sustainable, I would say, by the time I was 16, 17, as far as like a legit income stream. And then when we really took it to the next level was in 2018, graduated high school. I wanted to take a year off. I did not want to go to college. So the compromise there was with my mom and dad was I'll apply, got accepted to Madison, UW-Madison, and then took a year off. So I said, all right, I'm going to apply, get accepted, and then defer a year. So then I lived in Telluride, Colorado for 3-4 months, worked at a restaurant, sort of just ski bummed it. I call it high-end ski bumming it because it was super fun.
Got some life experience. Just
Totally.
Took a break. Yeah.
Yeah, and I managed 3 guys back home who were doing snow removal back here. And then in 2019, 2020, sort of early COVID, while I was at Madison after a year and a half, COVID hit and I was going for finance. So finance and HR were my 2 degrees from there. And to be honest, I was so burnt out. I was just like, I'm good at numbers. I'm good at finance, but there's a particular story where I was working with someone on creating a pro forma or a model for, iBanking. And the manager basically said, just add a 0, they're trying to increase the value of the project. I can't remember the exact context, but it was basically along the lines of just, oh yeah, no, that's, let's bump that up a little bit. And, ended up going through for that higher number. I was like, well, I just, I don't know what the number was, 10 million, 100 million, whatever. But I just created that much more value for someone else. And I didn't get to see a dime of it. Mind you, I wasn't working for the company or anything like that, but that was sort of like the pivotal principle that I learned at the time. Like, oh no, I really only want to do something that I have the direct risk and result from, right? Or risk and reward. So I will work my tail off to do it, but I want the reward on the back end. So that delayed gratification, I'm okay with, taking nothing today, tomorrow, whatever, with the potential or, to get the result later and have the full upside.
So did you quit school?
I did. I 3 classes short of a degree.
What?
Literally got to the point where it was impeding my ability to make money. And so I had an agreement with parents. I basically sat down with them. I said, this is just not making sense anymore. Like I was at a level 12 out of 10 stress for the last 10 years, 12 years almost. And it just became so unenjoyable that I'm like, something's got to get cut. And it's not the $1 million+ business here. It's the classes that I'm now actually paying someone else to go do for me, which is a double negative because you're paying the university to get a degree that you're not going to use in my particular circumstance. And I wasn't interested in learning the material anyway. And so admitting that on camera, whatever, but, at the end of the day, it became down to, I'm trying to please this party. I'm trying to please this party. You got customers that they don't care. They don't care that you're in school, that you're doing this. They want their communication, their project done. The guys want to get paid. Payroll's got to get run. No one really, that's another lesson. The real world doesn't really give a shit. So, and that's just taught through that. So I dropped school, 3 classes short. And then that's when we invested every dime I had accumulated up to that point. Plowed it back into the business. Actually went down to Mexico City for 3 months during COVID with a buddy that I'd hired to sort of bring on and help me with, fixing our labor problem. And went down there, hired 3 guys that were, professional in the industry. And we took it from sort of the high school, college guy crew to, I would call it in my eyes, I see it as a little bit more professional, right? Hiring older guys that have a lot of experience. And that's when we took it from, I think we went from 790 to 1.9 million in a year with that investment. So that included a bunch of equipment, guys, and that also lined up perfectly with COVID when everyone was, starting to stay at home and demand went through the roof and we were ready to supply it.
let's zoom in on that right there, because that's, you make that sound like, oh yeah, I just pulled this lever and then this money started coming in. But I feel like there's more to it than just dumping money in and getting money back.
Oh
So
yeah.
so how you make the decision? Okay, I want to invest. All right, I
Yeah.
got that. Where do where do you invest those dollars besides equipment, that sort of thing? I guess it's probably marketing and leads, like making the customers aware that you now have more capacity and capabilities.
Yeah.
Or how do you execute that?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. So part of it, there's three primary levers that you can pull in business, right? You need, at least in our business, you need labor, you need capital, and then you need customers, or demand for your service. I think those are the three. Labor. So you have to, first we start out by, we need professional people that we can rely on so that we can go sell the work, and have it done correctly. And we can pitch ourselves to bigger projects, more expensive stuff. So truly what we did was, we went to Mexico and we just laid out everything that we needed to do to get to the next level. It started with awareness. So I had a lot of, I posted on Nextdoor, which was an app that I think I haven't used in a while, but that was a huge part of sort of blowing up for us. As I just said, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. And so that sparked a lot of demand. So you get the customers.
And so when you post on Nextdoor, are you answering other people's questions, or are you just posting as your own business, or what's that look like?
It was pretty similar actually to the initial quarter page flyer. It's like, hi, I'm Jack. I think at the time I posted once when I was 16, and then again then. We didn't run a lot of advertising, but people started to know us because I went to high school in the area. I had already been working in the area for 7 years at the time, so the name was sort of out there. And then it was a matter of just getting your website really dialed in. Business is it's simple but not easy, right? Like, people need to know about you, need to be able to find you, and then need to be able to execute on your service, and educate the client on what do you do, how can you help them, and sometimes you have to help them identify their own problem. And so that came through, again, website. We did door hangers, posts on Facebook, stuff like that, and that just sort of blew things up. And honestly, we were working so fast that we were just doing things, and then it just seems sort of natural. We're like, oh yeah, we're meeting expectations. And then you sort of look back and you're like, oh, well, we went from 790 to 1.9 million a year. That includes buying the right equipment. What equipment do we need? How many more trucks do we need? Now we need more space. So we were renting a space, and eventually talked to the landlord. Hey, we need more space. I think at that time we actually got kicked out of my parents' house because we were running we'd have 15 cars up and down the road, and people thought we were building we live in a neighborhood that was not going to allow for any additional building or anything. Yeah. So I think one person, I don't know what happened, but long story short, they reported us to the city. We had to get out of there. And then today, actually, we own that entire shop. So that's a 5.5 acre parcel with a bunch of stuff on it. But we rented there for 4 or 5 years and then finally bought it. So to answer your question directly, there's just so much to growing a business like that it sort of, you have your marketing, then you got to go sell it. Then you got to execute on it, and then you got to make sure your finances are straight. Because if any one of those functions are not running well, you can advertise, you can sell and execute, but if you forget to bill all your clients, you got no money coming through the door. Or if you give your clients 30 or 60 days, but you don't have that on the front end, cash flow. So there's so many lessons that come through that type of growth. Is during this time though, I wasn't really taking any money out. I was just plowing every dollar back in. So cash flow wasn't an issue for the most part because I wasn't making any money for myself. So I was able to buffer some of those issues through just pure sacrifice. In hindsight, I don't know if I would do it any differently, but I definitely would have a different perspective today.
So from a marketing perspective, it was some paid, some just traditional door hangers, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
A couple different channels, and it worked. And then talk to me about the sales then. So you got the lead, now sales. are you saying no to certain projects? Do you have to have a minimum threshold, or how do you go do the type of work that actually is going to help you grow and be
Yeah.
profitable?
So I was the sole sales guy basically for the first 8 years almost. Don't advise that. Get another salesperson, train them, have them help you. I was taking like 40 meetings a week and trying to run the rest of the business, and it was hectic to say the least. But it was, to answer your question on the sales side, is we had some things that as we got like super busy, 40 meetings or whatever, we basically said, okay, there's just too much volume. Now we got to qualify out the person who's calling you to just get basically free information and free consultation. Start asking them, what's your budget? What are you looking to have done? Well, I don't really know. Okay, not a problem. But, before we show up, we want to know what we're walking into so we can help you with the right project. And if it ends up being like, hey, I just want a 10 by 10 patch of sod replaced, not a problem. It's not worth the time to go out there and do that. So those are the parameters that we started putting on there. Project minimums. We implemented a $2,500 project minimum, then a $3,500 project minimum, and that continued to go up. And the reality is when leads slow down, you stop. You lower your minimum, or you stop creating that barrier. Leads didn't really ever slow down, but after 4th of July in our industry here, people, they're out for the weekend. So yeah, these are just the raw answers. Like, there's no perfect way to do it. I'd love to say, we put a $2,500, minimum on. We didn't take anything under that. The answer is we were in growth mode. I took damn near everything, and learned quickly to qualify out, the tire kickers and stuff like that. But the answer is I was just taking every meeting and saying yes and figuring it out and pumping out estimates, 5, 6, 7 a day. I got to the point where I could pump out a $30,000-$40,000 estimate in an hour and a half. So, again, that was all me doing the work. So from a scalability standpoint, not great, but from a pure production standpoint, at my peak, I sold almost $4 million in landscape and lawn. So,
in a year? In
1 year, yeah. Which was bad for the mental health, but great for the pocketbook and great for the great for growing the company, is what I would say.
Go buy a therapist.
Yeah. I didn't even have time for the therapist.
Oh man. I don't want to get too stuck on this, but I am curious about the psychology behind the sales and your sales process, and also when you put out a $40,000 proposal estimate.
Yeah.
Is there anything you do to kind of massage it or make it seem like subconsciously this is a good deal? Whether it's putting like an expiration date on the proposal or anything else, I don't know, or is it just a matter of just here's the information?
No, it's never. I mean, it's all about understanding your customer. So it's through the sales process, you're doing discovery, you're talking to them. Typically what I'll do when I start off with my sales process is you getting to know the person, right? You're there, you ask them, hey, how long have you lived at your home? Blah, 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 blah. And through that, you start to get to know who they are, what they actually value. So they're calling you to their house because they want you to tell them what is possible, what they can do. And sometimes they don't even know, right? So as you're asking questions, you're discovering, what type of things you want. You don't ask always direct questions of like, what color paver do you want? Because they don't know what options are necessarily out there unless they've seen something, right? So I would ask questions like, have you seen pictures of stuff that you like? If so, can you send those to me? And so what I'm trying to do is build a picture, take all the information from them, and then basically put that together and then put it back to them. So from a numbers standpoint, a psychology standpoint, understanding what they value. So through that whole process, you understand, is this a price? Is this a price conscious customer that just basically wants the cheapest product and thrown in the ground and whatever? You will give them a different product and different experience, right? I'll actually spend half the time on that type of estimate because I know the likelihood of them purchasing or being a great customer is actually less. So I'll spend less time, but that doesn't mean I make the customer feel like I spent less time. right? I just pump it out real quick, might add 10% buffer, whatever. And basically I say, here's a budget number, because what's most important to you is a budget. So I won't add like a lengthy description or anything like that. I'll send it to them and I'll say, hey, here's a rough number. Are you interested in moving forward at this range, right? If you want to change X, Y, and Z, it could go up, let's say it's a $40,000 estimate. It could, if we upgrade a few of these materials, it could go as high as 45, 48. Or if you wanted to cut X, Y, and Z, you could get this down to like 30, 35. And so my job is to understand, like, how do you make the sale, right? If you want to make the sale and you give them everything that they asked for, but then you also make it really easy for them to not feel offended. For example, one person that we hired for our business sent me a contract for like a marketing contract, for example, for like $150,000. I didn't ask for that. I said our marketing budget was, $25,000 or $30,000 for that particular whatever. None of it was broken down. It was just a bunch of stuff and then 150 grand. And that was just like, you just laugh at it, right? Because you're just like, what? You just like, huh? And so the answer is like, because they're not aware of what the customer wants. If you had the first line item of what my priorities were at my budget, and then you said, hey, by the way, here's all the other services I have broken down, and that equals 150, fine, great. But you've given what I've asked for first. And so those are like the little things that I would get in front of those. Like, I've talked to enough customers, I don't even know, probably 6,000 people over the course of 12 years. And I will anticipate their response and address that response in the initial email. For example, actually, I was just at a customer yesterday. I've had a customer for 10 years, and we're sitting there. I was doing a walkthrough with him, catching up, just sort of shooting the shit and reconnecting with him. And so we were talking about some pavers that had sunk or whatever. And I was like, all right, this is what we're going to do. He's like, all right, just shoot me straight. Like, where are we going to be at? I'm like, well, it's probably $2,500 or less for this particular area. Well, then we continue to talk. Hey, well, I think we should probably get this whole thing power washed and repoly sand. So I'm then talking through upselling and just things that I know that he wants, right? He didn't know that it was possible. I'm like, well, you got a bunch of moss here. You got a bunch of stuff here. You don't need to do it. It's not like mission critical or it's not whatever. So I'm not hard selling it, but this is another option that as we fix this area, if we want it all to blend together, this is what we can do to sort of blend everything together. And then you're good for another 5 to 7 years on the poly sand for this particular project. I only ever stated the number $2,500 or less, but we continued to talk ourselves into things. So when I sent him the estimate, it was $3,500, $4,000, whatever. So my job is to proactively get ahead of, hey, I sent you the estimate. It's more than the $2,500 that we talked about because we added X, Y, and Z. If you want to take that off, we can take that off to get back down to what the original price I stated. Those are the types of proactive communication that I can tell you have helped me incredibly well. Because if you don't do that, when the customer gets the estimate for $15,000 or $1,500 more than you stated, they lose trust and they immediately reject, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I can tell you that single-handedly probably was one of my biggest assets in sales, is understanding what the customer is going to say, getting ahead of it, and then addressing it in that initial email. Because now you've built trust and you're re-solidifying that trust in every interaction. And now when you have a mistake or you whatever, they already trust you. So they'll, if you have a change order, they're like, no, this guy's been straight with me the entire time. He's been proactive with me as far as communication, X, Y, Z. And at the end of the day, people will open up their wallet because they just trust you. And you have a genuine relationship with them. So that'd give you sort of an idea of, yeah.
Do you, we can cut this out too if you don't want to reveal it, but
that's fine.
Do you price the customer?
Sometimes. I would say within, like 9 times out of 10, the pricing's pretty consistent. There's also a market price for a lot of this stuff. And so we're oftentimes up against, 2 or 3 other people. Homeowners, it's a little bit more variable, but all commercial projects, you're expected to be bidding against 2 or 3 other people. So when you're in growth mode, you sort of figure out a way to make it work. So oftentimes it's like, all right, here's my base price, what I think it should be. And then it's like, do I think I could, there might be some risk factors and stuff like that. So the answer is I don't price the customer. Like I don't just like arbitrarily add 20% unless it's someone who I know is going to be a pain in the ass. And so basically all you're doing is you're adding that 20 or 30, not even 30%, but 10 or 20%, basically because it might not take you 10 or 20% longer on the job, but the amount of logistics that person's going to require is going to, you have to pay for that time. So the answer is no, but yes, depending on sort of like what you sense about the customer. The hours on site and all that stuff stay the same. And then the pain in the ass factor can be priced in sometimes. And that's really only with residential too. Commercial is pretty strict. Also commercial doesn't get as emotional about things. So, that helps.
Throughout this building process, has there been, that's kind of cool. Just those two airplanes just flying.
Oh yeah. Coming in on the ILS approach. So no, it's pretty cool. I fly planes around here too. And, you can fly under them. So sometimes you'll watch them like come over you.
Oh yeah.
Like, as they're coming into MSP. I'll show you a video after this, but I was flying over the cities on Tuesday. And there's two jets, coming over, and it becomes normal, but it's super cool. I think it's cool.
So, all right, let's just talk about your mindset a little bit here. So, I mean, you're 25 now, you started when you were 13, you're flying planes, you got a couple other businesses. Give me just your kind of philosophy on life and business.
Yeah. Life and business. I can tell you life and business, I would say is it hasn't changed in a long time. So there's a lot of, I don't know if it's what we call first principles necessarily, but a lot of the fundamentals of life are still the same as they were 100 years ago. So today, my philosophy is around health. Health is extremely important to being successful. I say that because the law of attraction, the ability to function under high stress, you need to make sure you take care of your health in order to take all of that. I can tell you for the first 10 years, I did not do that. So my philosophy today, I'm actually trying to think through this. Like
it's a big question.
Yeah, it's back to the fundamentals of you just got to do the work. And the rest of it will eventually come. Now, that's really easy for me to sit here and say today. You sort of have to just do things blindly sometimes. Like you just you don't know the result, but you know that if you do X, Y, and Z, you can predictably get somewhere. I'm actually trying to get back to the big question of what's your philosophy?
Let me ask you, as you think about that, let that simmer in the subconscious. But like, when you wanted to go do something new, like go fly a plane, is that something that you've always in the back of your head had an interest in and wanted to go do, and now it's like, okay, now I have the means to go do it? Or is it like, that's cool, I want to go do that, and I'm going to go learn how to do that?
Yeah, okay. This actually allows me to answer the question probably a lot better. So we have core values, both as a company, but most of those core values are just who I am and who the company was, and through the people. So one of our core values is always willingness to learn and adapt. Mm-hmm. So I always am learning. I don't care what it is. I'm always asking questions, always learning. That could be simply asking, where did this chair come from? Where did it, to the relevant party, right? Yeah. It seems like a dumb question, but what you do through that is you start to open up what the world is and how it functions, right? So it could be something like this building. I happen to know a guy who was working for the union company that did the concrete on this building or whatever. And so I'm connecting the dots between what I was seeing 2 or 3 years ago on that. And then, I happened to meet one of the designers that was working on the space or something like that. And those individual details are not relevant, but you start to ask enough questions to develop a view of the world of what it really is and not what you fantasize it to be. I'm very logical left brain. Like, I'm trying to think of where to go with this, but basically you ask enough questions in the landscape context. For example, when someone asked me to do something and I didn't know how to do it, I would just go ask every question under the sun. how do I know how to cut and trim a tree so well, but also know the, the engineering of structures so well? It's because I just asked 100 questions or more about, why do we trim this tree this way and blah, 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 and this disease, and, the growth pattern of when this tree has a disease versus this type of disease. And so all of a sudden you realize that it's like, you get all these little pieces of information, and then in my mind, and basically you understand it now to a point where you can simplify it and dumb it down. So when I say business is simple, or when I say something is simple, it's because you've asked so many questions, you've created a worldview around it, and basically packaged it together and created a simple version of it. So that's why I think good professors or good teachers or good mentors, they're able to dumb things down because they know every single aspect about it, that they're like, nope, just do this one thing and sort of the rest will come. Because if you sit here and I tell you, you ask a question about something, I go into a technical analysis, so you're going to either check out, you're going to forget 90% of the information. If you keep it simple, you can execute on that simple principle and move forward, right? We do the work, just do the work. You will learn so much through that simple principle of just do it, right? There's Nike.
Right.
All these things of just do the actions and the rest will sort of come, right? So people ask me like, how are you so successful? How do I get more customers? It's like, I don't know. There's like 3 basic things you can do tomorrow. You can print a flyer. You can go hand them all out. You can talk to everyone about what you do. Those are 5 things you can do tomorrow. Now, whether you do them or not is why people are or are not successful. Information is the commodity, and the action is the asset. And I would say back to and again, we're sort of wrapping this all up is like, what's your philosophy? Action. Like, action is the asset. Do the work. It is no more complex than that. Like, if you just wake up and do what you say you're going to do and you do it 1,000 times, something will come of that. You will either learn and pivot, or you definitely will learn, maybe pivot, or you'll just find that, you've refined that art. You talk to 6,000 customers, you start to get to know people pretty well. Now you can anticipate what they're going to say, and now you can get ahead of that. And now your sales closing rate increases because you're getting ahead of problems and making customers feel better. And people, when they feel good, they buy more. And again, these are not things I Googled. It's like, I've gone through 6,000 interactions, and I've sort of bundled them into some of these basic concepts. And I could point to many examples then. So that's sort of how my business philosophy comes together. Just do the actions and start to pull a bunch of information and simplify.
Yeah. You mentioned something about law of attraction.
Oh, yeah.
You kind of big into vision boarding and goal. Like, talk to me about your goal setting process and how you just the process.
It's actually good because I actually just went through this on Tuesday of this week, like 3 days ago. Basically, so when I sold or merged our companies, Hartigan Outdoors is my original company. We're now LNG Hartigan. That was a huge pivot point. So all the goals I had set at the beginning of the year, for the most part, I had actually either achieved them. For example, I wanted to build out a really solid leadership team. When we merged, we got a really solid leadership team. So we actually checked a lot of boxes off, but I also have less control over the result of that now. And so I basically sat back and for 4 hours sat in my apartment and basically I label out each pillar of my life, right? So I have fitness, personal, and business are sort of 3 pillars. And I think about the things that I want to achieve. And I think about them deeper. So I just did a half Ironman. I want to do another one in the fall. Okay, great. I know I want to do one. All right. I know the event I'm going to do. Now I pick a time that I want to get it in. And I know in order to achieve that, I need to go talk to my coach, put a training plan together and all these things. So it's like, I start very macro and then I break it down into the micro of, okay, now starting tomorrow, what do I need to do to achieve that goal? So that's fitness, personal. Actually, I'll go to business, but one of the goals in business is like I have a thing that I'm working on right now that I want to get off the ground. And so I know what the idea is. I know what the vision is. I know that we need to develop something for that. And so I will basically take it from, okay, this is the vision. What are the goals? Like, what would success look like in the next 6 to 12 months? And I'll write all that down. EOS is something we use in business. That breaks it down from 1 year goals, 3-year picture, quarterly rocks. And so it just helps you start with big concept all the way down to what are we going to work on starting tomorrow. And then I combine that with something called 75 hard and the power list. So that power list is the 5 things you do every single day to quote unquote win the day, right? And so the idea is if you're doing those daily actions, you will eventually show up at the result, right? If you take one step and then you take another step and you keep doing that every day, you will have run a mile at some point. It's inevitable that you will get there. It just may not be as quick, maybe really quick. So the goal setting process starts macro, starts to think about who do I want to be? What's my personal philosophy? And then on the investment or finance side, it's, what is my investment thesis, right? So again, starting macro and going down to, how do I start doing that tomorrow? And that includes this call literally right after this is because of that goal setting was I reached out to people I know in certain areas to get that action moving forward. Nice. Whether it goes anywhere or not is subject to that, but you're at least exploring the opportunities. So now I've explored 20 opportunities by the time the next person's explored 3. And again, this goes back to getting as much information you can to build the picture and make the best decision. And I think that plays into being successful in general is just moving fast.
How do you, for me, I find this a challenge. I set a big picture goal and I get all fired up. Right?
Yeah.
And then I start the process and I'm like, oh, this is harder than I thought. Maybe I should lower the goal. How do you not move the goal?
That's a great question. I honestly think that is an internal thing. You have to be ready yourself. There has to be a bigger reason or a reason that you're doing, and this could be weight loss for someone, right? It's not even a question whether being morbidly obese is unhealthy or not. I don't think no one's going to deny that.
Lizzo might.
Lizzo and a lot of people might today, but I can also look them dead in the face and say, you don't actually believe that. You're just repeating that to make yourself feel better about yourself, right? And it's just like, again, when you say it, you just sort of laugh because it goes away from those first principles or fundamentals. It's just not true, right? Like it's like a man is a woman and a woman is a man. It's just not true. Right. Like you don't like.
No matter which way you spin it, look at it, it's just not going to change.
It is what it is, right? And it's like, so what was your question again? Sorry.
It was about not lowering the goal.
Oh, the answer is like to not lower the goal, meaning you have to set the goal that's both motivating, right? So if you're early on in goal setting, you should set something that you're going to hit, because to set a goal and say, I want to make $10 million this year. Well, the odds of you hitting that goal are very low. Great. There is a concept. Some people like myself get driven by having a huge goal coming short, but still making a lot of progress. But you have to mix that with some smaller goals that you can actually achieve. Otherwise, you're just going to continue to think you're a failure. Some people are really goal and like motivated and driven. Other people are relaxed and they need to be led. That is why some people are successful and not successful. You can be born poor, you can be born wealthy. If you don't have those skills or that drive, it's going to be very challenging to get to that next step. And that could be, again, it's like fitness, right? If you don't have a motivation to go to the gym, whether that be intrinsic or internal or whatever, it's going to be really hard to go to the gym. For me, I just wake up, I battle my mind for like 5 or 7 minutes, but I know ultimately I'm going to the gym this morning. Like there's no question. Like deep down, there's no question that I'm going to the gym this morning. Despite me having a little, sitting on the head on the pillow, like, whatever. Oh man, I'm tired, whatever. So not moving the goal, I think, has to do with how important is that goal to you. People who move their goals, they're just sort of throwing them out there and like saying, I hope I
Yeah.
hope I
That
hit
sounds
this.
fun. Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
cool. You know, it'd be great to go, you know, hike Denali or hike, you know, Mount Everest, but God, that hike tomorrow, I don't really feel like doing it. It's like, okay, then you don't actually want to go hike it, because if you actually wanted to do that, it'd be very easy for you to get up, you know, and you'd bulldoze through uh, a lot of the hardship because the goal's so big and it's so strong. So people just have to be ready for that, and sometimes that's one goal. You know, start with one small goal of getting up and making your bed every morning, right? If that's like, and that's the power list, that's all these things of like just achieving the little wins. You will build the confidence in yourself that you can then do what you say you're going to do. I think that's back to like the core of, if you don't even believe that you can do it, no one else is going to believe it, right? So law of attraction you were just mentioning earlier is like, people are attracted to people that do the work because there's a barrier there, right? Like you did something that not everyone does, whether that's an Ironman, whether that's you buy a nice car or something like that, there's a barrier to entry to, and there's a sense of exclusivity, right? And so even like when we fly planes, like not everyone's a pilot to get in a pilot club. Like we can just walk in and go fly a plane. It's cool because not everyone does it. It's not as cool to get in your Hyundai and go to work every day because everyone does it, right? There's a supply and demand and a scarcity factor that makes something attractive. And that's hard work, right? It's doing things, suffering and doing things that other people don't want to do, that will ultimately be most attractive to people, despite what maybe the short-term feedback is.
Man, that's amazing. We're at 9:10. Let me just ask you this last question. You can just wrap it up with this. The parting word, the word of wisdom, the challenge, the ask. What do you want to leave the listeners with?
I think at the end of the day, identify who you want to be, and just start with what drives you. Do a lot of investment in yourself. So I think I've invested, I can tell you, hundreds of thousands of dollars, which again, it's not necessarily a dollar amount, but that dollar amount equals a lot of experiences that you start to discover yourself through, whether that's traveling, getting yourself in different rooms with different types of people, not just diverse backgrounds from a race standpoint, or the traditional stuff, but like people in different industries, people in different parts of their life. Invest in yourself so you can actually truly understand who you are, and push yourself to the edge. Like at some point, push yourself to the edge to find where you know, at the edge is where you start to find out who you actually are. And that philosophy is not for everyone, but I can tell you that has been extremely important for me, in becoming who I am, is again, gathering as much possible information you can, learning stuff about yourself, challenging your ideas. Again, I'm always inviting friction into my life and always inviting, contrarian thoughts or points of view, because when you stop doing that, you stop understanding the world around you. And then when you can't understand the world around you, you either complain about it or, you turn off that law of attraction. Is because if you're complaining, you go negative or whatever, no one's attracted to you. And maybe not no one, but it's stay fit, stay healthy, invest in yourself, gather information, and be good to people. Like people, doesn't matter who they are, they will understand your authenticity. At the end of the day, they'll know if you did the work. We were just talking before this, like there's a lot of people online who's like, you're 21 and you've done nothing but sell a program. Like you didn't do the work. It's impossible for you to have done the work. So find those people who you look up to, get around those people, and, start increasing the average of the 5 people you're around. And I think that'll help you get to the next step.
Let's go. Jack, thank you, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Let's go.
That was great.